Hello and welcome to this edition of Crossover. I'm Ji Xiaojun with Charlotte and Gregory. Welcome to Crossover. Now, a new amendment has been passed at the end of last year, 2012, on the 28th of December. This is concerning the law on protection of the rights and interests of the aged. This is interesting. Basically, what it says is the family members, especially the younger generation, it's been made a duty for them to go back to see their parents and to look after their parents both physically and mentally. And that's something new. I mean, filial piety has always been a very important part of Chinese traditional values. But, you know, to be written in law, this is the first time. How do you see this?
I think this particular legislation is developed with very good intentions. That is to say that a lot of parents are left behind at home, and the kids left the city for one reason or another. They cannot go back on a regular basis or even once a year. So they like to heighten the necessity of taking care of them. One of the approaches to encourage the kids to go back to visit them once in a while. However, I think there are other fundamental problems to be solved. This could be a warning sign, some kind of a paying attention to this issue at large, but I don't think this particular approach is the final solution.
I think a law like this is, I mean, how do you enforce something like this? You know, I can't imagine it would be very easy to enforce, and I can't imagine that there would be that many families who would actually take legal measures.
It doesn't say.
Right.
I mean, if you don't do it, what's going to happen?
Exactly. But when I saw this, I don't know, it made me smile, and it filled me with this sort of, I don't know, energy, because it's not necessarily practical. But I think the concept of looking after your family, of looking after your parents, you know, this group notion that is part of Chinese culture is something that's very heartwarming. A law like this in the States would never, never, ever, you'd never see something like this, but it's very humane.
Actually, it serves as a little reminder to the whole society. It is important for the younger generation to go back more often to see their parents, because they've done a little survey on one of the programs on CCTV, visit, how frequent the visit is. Once a week, that occupies 16.5%. Once a month, that's 13.8%. Once every quarter, that's 9.5%. Once half a year, that's nearly 15%. The most is once a year. That's nearly 1/3 and of the total respondents. And never in many years, once in many years, that's nearly 12%. That's a lot.
True.
And China is becoming more aged, actually, these years. We're now talking about the total population of seniors over 60, nearly 200 million.
True.
That's a huge number. And it's not rare for the younger generation of the big family to be working at a different city. And in many cases, the younger generation, they might be the only child in the family. So when they go to a different city to be educated, after graduation, many of them would choose to stay in that city because they're familiar with that place.
And to pursue, you know, maybe bigger, better opportunities, or,
in a different city or in a different country even.
Yeah.
I just wonder, for example, if you ask these adult children to return home to visit parents once in a while without specifying how often, for example, you have to have employers to cooperate with this particular arrangement. For example, allow them to go back once a year for 3 days, 7 days with pay. That's one thing. Second, we have to look at other issues. For instance, if this older person retired, if there's a better pension system, so they are independent financially, so this need will decrease. Thirdly, if the community has certain activities or arrangement to pay attention to these retired people at home without having to bother the kids to come back from time to time. Of course, another approach is the intent you have as a kid. For example, you make phone calls from time to time. You ask your neighbors to take care of their old parents, or you have somebody return to the family to say hello on your behalf. So there are many approaches. I also believe it's important, for example, to have these older people know how to take care of themselves, get rid of bad habits, smoking, drinking, and so on, more exercises. So this particular legislation, I see that as a signal to identify the problem faced by Chinese at this point in the Chinese community and do something about it, hopefully in a package.
But what puzzles me a little bit is, as we said earlier, and as we've mentioned in so many times, to look after your parents, the old generation, and this is an essential part of our values, our Chinese culture. So why do we still need an article written in law to remind people of doing that?
I had the same thought. And the first thought I had was, wow, if a law like this is being passed, it must be that
something is wrong.
These values and this tradition, this specific tradition, is getting a lot weaker. You know, working in other towns, cities, provinces, not having paid leave. You know, having it be very inconvenient to get home during holidays with buying train tickets or plane tickets, or you know. I mean, it does bring up a lot of questions regarding, you know, the change in these values and in society.
Let me bring up another point. Parenting. In a family with a normal proceedings, for example, the kids would have affection toward the parents because they were brought up to know that the parents have sacrificed all along for their education, whatever, future, and so on. So they would do their very best to visit the family, parents, or do something else, financial support, and so on a regular basis. So if they don't go back, two possibilities. One is you mentioned earlier, too far away to go home without paid vacation, no financial capacity. And another possibility is don't have good relations to begin with. So I believe this problem has to be tackled from the very beginning. If the parents at the time raising the kids have laid the groundwork to have a very interesting, meaningful interaction, I think the kids would try their very best to cover these obligations. If they don't want to see each other for the rest of their lives, these rules will not apply.
So this
But you know, it's interesting though. It's interesting though. I have a lot of friends, you know, in late 20s, early 30s, that don't necessarily get along with their parents wonderfully. You know, they still have issues with their parents and everything. But they still have a very strong
sense of obligation,
towards seeing their parents, having their parents come see them, you know, sending their parents money, or, you know, there's still a very strong sense of obligation there, even if relations aren't the best.
True.
And that's something I think that is, you know, you do see in China because culturally and historically, this notion of filial piety, of, you know, looking after the older generation is so strong.
It is.
You know, people really do view it as an obligation, a moral obligation.
This is a part of the family responsibility, I would say.
Yeah, it's something you do.
But the thing is, you know, what happens is, you know, what some parents are not quite happy about is, these kids may just come back from time to time. They may just give us money, but they don't sit together with us watching these
soap operas.
Talk about these, you know, they do not spend time with us together to gossip, you know, around whatever is going on around us. That's why, remember, look after, according to the law, to that article, look after the parents physically,
and mentally.
And mentally.
And financially.
And financially. That seems to be the first time. Something like, you know, mental care has been included in the law article for the very first time.
I agree. I read a book recently, very much moved by the contents. This gentleman is in Taiwan. When he grew up, he suffered domestic violence. Not only his father, but also uncles and aunts joined this team of beating him up. But toward the end, there's a understanding. His father was very sick. He returned to the hospital to take care of him very carefully. But again, of course, we like to see a family has this interaction on a friendly, warm basis to begin with. So the intent of the necessity, the obligation on the kid's side is much stronger, you know. Again, I mentioned one more thing. I'd like to see the community itself take on this issue as a part of their regular assignments, you know. So when the kids are not around, there could be community center or older people lined up to make phone calls on a regular basis. So it do not depend solely on the kids coming home.
Well, this is so kind of you. I mean, Gregory, obviously he's talking about this issue from a different perspective. You're basically saying if the kids are not coming back home to see you, it's your fault, your education fault. Anyway, let's take a break and we'll continue our discussion after that. You're watching Crossover. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Crossover. Today we're talking about how you should look after your parents, because this has been included actually in the new amendment recently passed by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. This is concerning the law on protection of the rights and interests of the aged. And it says you have to, as a child, you have to go back home more frequently to visit your parents and look after them both physically and mentally. And the thing is, I've also, heard about some complaints about my peers and saying, well, it's not, they don't want to spend time with their parents. It's only because they may not go back home that frequently, but for the Spring Festival, they definitely are going to spend time with the family, with their parents, talk about, whatever is going on in the family. And sometimes they do make complaint, things like, I love spending time together with my parents. It's only, all these topics, all the questions they asked about me. Hey, when are you going to get a girlfriend? When are you getting married?
When are you going to
have a kid? All these questions are so embarrassing. Well, that's basically a reflection of the, generation gap.
Yeah, and that's true. If you think about it, especially China in the past 30 years has changed so much. And, it's night and day, basically. So there you do see a huge generation gap between, adults and their parents now. But, people, they're trying. Everyone's trying.
And that's why sometimes the younger generation would say, yeah, to save both of us, the parents and us, the trouble's okay. We'll make sure that, you are going to live a comfortable life. But other than that, leave it to us. Exactly. That's our responsibility. We'll take care of that.
Yeah.
Let me use something on top of that. I think that the greatest comfort to all parents, I'm a parent myself, for example, is you do your very best to become a strong person. You have no problems, no headache for parents to worry about. You have a good career. You are a good father yourself, raising kids. I think that's a part of the solution. Secondly, when they return home, they should be prepared with possibilities that the father, mother getting old. They repeat old stories without knowing it. For example, this older lady I visited, she is over 80 years old. She would ask me the same question. How old are you now? How old are you now? And I knew this is a part of her mental, state. So I would not thinking this is ridiculous. So all kids should be prepared. If you go home to indicate you love our parents, ready for those type of situation. Don't be disturbed. Don't get unhappy because that's a part of reality.
In that, do we see any big differences between different cultures in China and America?
I think so. I think in the States anyway, our culture is much more oriented towards the individual. And if you don't like something, you cannot like something, and you can tell the whole world you don't like something. You still do obviously have these notions of filial piety and things like this in families, of course, but on the whole, our culture in the States is very much based on the individual. So, as an individual, if I don't get along with my mother and we really can't get along, I'm not going to bend over backwards to get along with my mom. She can bend over backwards to get along with me if she wants. But if we don't get along, we don't get along. And there's no... I don't know. It's different. It's different.
I mean, in China, the scenario would be if you don't get along with your parents, say, but they're your parents.
I know.
We would say they're your parents. You're the child,
and that's very much ingrained in the culture. So, and that you could ask a million Chinese people that same question, and maybe 99% of them would say what you just said. Well, they're your parents. You know, you have to get along. They're your parents. It's your job to get along with them.
We're saying basically, you know, when people make complaints about their children not coming back more often enough, you know, to see them, it's the precondition is they live in two different places.
Of course.
But if you put the two sides together, say the parents living together, or the kids coming back to their hometown to be working and living together with the parents, then that's a problem solved. How difficult is that these days now, according to your observation?
To live together?
Yeah.
I think
or to work and to go back to the hometown to be in the same place.
I think for a lot of people it is difficult. I mean, again, you know, I have a really great Chinese girlfriend, and she was married and it didn't work out, but she was married to a very successful PhD businessman, and it just didn't work out. And so they divorced, and now she's found someone that she, you know, is madly in love with. They've known each other a long time. You know, spiritually, psychologically, she's never been better, but he doesn't make as much money. He doesn't have a PhD. You know, he doesn't own lots of property.
Doesn't have all these conditions.
And the parents are really upset. They're really upset that she's, you know, together with this guy. And it's a shame because on the one hand, you know where they're coming from. You know, they want the best for their daughter, and for them, in their minds, the best is
a PhD degree.
She doesn't have to worry about her
future.
Financial future, or any aspect of her future. For them, that's the most important thing. For her, you know, her
Emotional
notion is, well,
feelings.
I can work, I can make money if I need money. I want someone that I can be happy with. And she's found him, but her parents...
I think parents are different. Families are different. This is one good example. But some parents are much more understanding. If my kid, my son, my daughter, loves another person, and there's reason to be, and then I will support that. That happens very often. In the States, for example, the economy is going down, so some independent children, already in the 20s or the 30s, they may return home temporarily to stay at home, to face this situation, eventually be able to start up again. But that's also allowed to happen. So it depends on the family.
Yeah.
You know, come home or don't come home. You don't have one formula to apply to all situations. I doubt it. You know.
Right. I guess in different places and different cities, and it also varies with the differences in education. I mean, if the senior generation, their education is as good as the younger generation, I guess the gap will be smaller.
It will be smaller. And also, I think, just with the States, you know, there's so many people from so many different cultural backgrounds that you really don't have a norm because, you know, there are people from all over the world, or people with traditions from all over the world that are different. You know.
Another situation happens very often is that the parents may feel that if the kids are strong, successful, they feel happy themselves. So sometimes the kids will pretend they have done many things. There's a movie I remember in the States, you know, telling the father, I'm conductor, I'm such and such. And when the father getting old, decided to see for them the last time, he found out not true at all. So again, there's individual situations. So I don't think that's a formula applied to all.
Yeah, that's sometimes also being used as an excuse, because sometimes the parents would say, okay, you don't have to come back that often to see us. Concentrate on your work, because your success in work is actually, you know, a form of filial piety. And we'll feel happy, and we will, once again, maybe we have that face culture playing an important part in it. And when the parents are talking about their sons and daughters with their friends and relatives, and if, you know, their children are doing well, even in a different city distant from theirs, and they will still feel very proud of that.
True.
And that's when they feel the comfort. And that's also maybe a form to show the children now are taking care of their parents mentally, but in a special way. Well, let's take a break now, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion about taking care of your parents, both physically and mentally, according to the new amendment. You're watching Crossover. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Crossover, and today we're talking about this new amendment being passed recently at the end of 2012 by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. And this says, actually, in written words, that children, the younger generation, should look after their parents both physically and mentally. Well, it doesn't say, whether how often you should visit your parents, but I mean, we all understand that filial piety is a very important part of the traditional culture, has been included in the exams, for the civil servants. For every year, there are quite a few national exams, unified exams for recruiting new members as the civil servants. And that is also a very important part of it. And remember, even in some companies, when they recruit people, I don't know how they're going to test it, but it's also been included as a part of this new criteria of recruiting new people.
Well, this particular legislation, to go back to the roots of it, I think it's good intention for sure. But if you have no detailed ways to specify what do you mean,
enforce it.
Yeah, what do you mean go back often? How often is often enough? Then it's just an empty shell itself. So this approach, in many cases, has backfired, because if a law cannot be applied at all, then people would say, okay, this is just something on a piece of paper. It doesn't mean anything. When that happens very often, people lose the respect for the law.
So, Jane, do you have the statistics of once this law was put into place, what the response was?
There is a little survey done on the internet concerning this specific article. 42.2% of the respondents supporting this new article, saying yes, and 35.6% say no. The rest, 22.2%,
indifferent.
Indifferent.
Yep.
So
statistics you cited earlier is only 9-10% or so never go back. So 90%, 10%, 11%, they're already
At least
going back.
once a year.
Including this 35% says the law itself doesn't mean much, but I have already done it. Perhaps.
Now, how important is that value? Actually, it can be reflected in one of the sounds being included in the Spring Festival Gala. That's like the most important, most watched gala in China every year. This is the sound from a few years back. Bring up your smile, best wishes. Together with your loved ones, go back home to see your family. Family, mothers prepared some repetitions, and fathers prepared a big feast. All these troubles, share it with your mom. And the things that happen in work, talk about it with your dad. Come back home more often. Doesn't matter if it's only helping mom doing the dishes. The parents are not expecting the children to be a big shot. It's only to be together is something we value a lot. Come back home more often.
And this song is on the gala every year, right?
Yep.
Almost,
Someone will
yes.
sing this song every
Yes,
year,
almost.
basically.
I like to see that this song has a good purpose. For example, if I watch the program, I say, I've already done that, for example. I may say, I want to do more, or I start thinking going home. So it always has a positive impact. And the song's a beautiful song.
It's a beautiful song, and great lyrics,
the melody is good.
Well, as we said earlier, I mean, the article included in the law could be serving as a reminder to the younger generation. But if you are not able, or if you're not ready to enforce it, well, put it in there then. I mean, it's we're talking about law. Law is
That's true.
serious.
You could do a campaign of, encouraging people to look after their family more, or to go home and see family members more often. But to make it a law is quite...
I mean, are we going to a different extreme? Or?
For example, the Chinese expression, 家丑不可外扬, we don't wash laundry in public places. If I'm a father, I go to the court, telling the world.
It happened.
My son is not asking to visit me often. I think that particular exposure perhaps give me more pain than just face it and to suffer a little bit. So
it happened before.
It happened a couple of times, but I don't think that's a regular practice to go to the court complain about kids not coming home.
But with an article included as a law article, then that's actually giving the legal foundation for the parents to sue their own children, though it doesn't happen that often, but it happened.
You know, I think this also brings up an interesting issue, and that is, you know, before a family might have, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 children that could then look after their parents. And so if 4 of them couldn't go home, at least you have 2, you know, there and you know, big happy family. Whereas now, you know, we're getting to the point where one set of parents has 1 child. And so that 1 child has to look after their 2 parents. And that child probably is married to someone who is also in the same situation with no siblings. So it could be that that's why we're seeing more of a, you know, more of a strong approach to this notion that has always been in Chinese culture. And we think, well, you know, why turn this into a law? But it could be that we're starting to see the effects of that. You know, the fact that there 2 people have 4 parents that they have to look after.
Let me mention again, the necessity of financial independence. In the States, for example, I retire right now, but I have enough money to get by. So when my kids come to see me, it's out of love, not necessity. For example, that's not relying on me for a job arrangement to get him some kind of a place to get work. So that happens naturally. So if the parents have financial capacity, independence, then the local service program can take care of them. Then the parents' love is added plus instead of a necessity. I hope that's the case.
What happened in those lawsuit cases? Well, you know, the parents, they charged their children for
with
not
neglect.
taking care of them properly, and it's in most cases it's not about their financial arrangement. It's
sometimes
more about the
violence.
neglect of of the children, because they seldom went back to physically to see their parents. Sometimes it was just a phone call. That was a comfort, but I guess they were expecting more.